Wonderland
by Lewis Carroll. A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners at it, busily painting them red. Alice thought this a very curious thing, and she went nearer to watch and heard one of them say,
"Look out now, 5. Don't go splashing paint over me like that."
I couldn't help it. 7 jogged my elbow.
That's right, 5. Always lay the blame on others.
You'd better not talk.
I heard the Queen say only yesterday,
You deserve to be beheaded.
What for?
that's none of your business, too.
Yes, it is his business, and I'll tell him. It was for bringing the cook tulip roots instead of onions.
7 flung down his brush, and it just began
All the injustice.
when his eye chanced to fall upon Alice, as she stood watching them. And he checked himself suddenly. The others looked around also, and all of them bowed low.
Would you tell me why you are painting those roses?
5 and 7 said nothing, but looked at 2.
Why, the fact is, you see, miss, this here ought to have been a red rose tree, and we put a white one in by mistake. And if the Queen was to find out, we should have all our heads cut off. So you see, miss, we're doing our best before she comes to.
The Queen!
Alice looked round, eager to see the Queen. She was rather doubtful whether she ought not to lie down on her face like the 3 gardeners.
But what would be the use of a procession if people had all to lie down on their faces so that they couldn't see it?
So she stood still where she was and waited. When the procession came opposite to Alice, they all stopped.
Who is this? What is your name, child?
My name is Alice, so please your majesty. Why, they're only a pack of cards after all. I needn't be afraid of them.
And who are these?
Said the Queen, pointing to the 3 gardeners who were lying around the rose tree.
How should I know? It's no business of mine.
The Queen turned crimson with fury, and after glaring at her for a moment like a wild beast, screamed,
"Off with her head! Off!"
The King laid his hand timidly on her arm and said,
Consider, my dear, she's only a child.
the Queen turned angrily away from him.
Get up! Leave off that! What have you been doing here?
May it please your majesty, we were trying.
I see. Off with their heads! Can you play croquet?
The gardeners were silent and looked at Alice as the question was evidently meant for her.
Yes?
Come on, then!
And Alice joined the procession, wondering very much what would happen next.
It's a very fine day.
Said a timid voice at her side. She was walking by the white rabbit, who was peeping anxiously into her face.
Fairy, where's the Duchess? Hush, hush. She's under sentence of execution. What for? Did you say what a pity? No, I didn't. I don't think it's at all a pity. I said, what for? She boxed the Queen's ears. Oh, hush. The Queen will hear you. You see, she came rather late, and the Queen said,
Get to your places!
And people began running about in all directions, tumbling up against each other. However, they got settled down in a minute or 2, and the game began. Alice thought she had never seen such a curious croquet ground in all her life. It was all ridges and furrows. The balls were like hedgehogs, and the mallets like flamingos. The soldiers had to double themselves up and stand on their hands and feet to make the arches. Alice soon came to the conclusion that it was a very difficult game indeed. All the players played at once without waiting for turns, and quarreling all the while. And in a very short time, the Queen was in a furious passion and went stamping about and shouting,
Off with his head! Off with her head!
Alice began to feel very uneasy. To be sure, she had not as yet had any dispute with the Queen, but she knew it might happen any minute.
and then what would become of me? They're dreadfully fond of beheading people here. The great wonder is that there's anyone left alive.
She was looking about for some way of escape and wondering whether she could get away without being seen, when she noticed a curious appearance in the air. It puzzled her very much at first, but after watching it a minute or 2, she made it out to be a grin.
It's the Cheshire Cat. Now I shall have somebody to talk to.
How are you getting on?
Said the cat as soon as there was mouth enough for it to speak with. Alice waited till the eyes appeared, then nodded.
It's no use speaking to it till its ears have come, or at least one of them.
In another minute, the whole head appeared, and Alice began an account of the game, feeling very glad she had someone to listen to her.
I don't think they play at all fairly, and they quarrel so dreadfully one can't hear oneself speak, and there aren't any rules in particular. At least, if there are, nobody attends to them. And you've no idea how confusing it is, all the things being alive. For instance, there's the arch I've got to go through next, walking about at the other end of the ground. And I should have crocheted the queen's hedgehog next, only it ran away when it saw mine coming.
How do you like the queen?
Not at all. She's so extreme.
She noticed the queen close behind her, listening.
Likely to win that it's hardly worthwhile finishing the game.
The queen smiled and passed on.
Who are you talking to?
Said the king, going up to Alice and looking at the cat's head with great curiosity.
It's a Cheshire cat. Allow me to introduce it.
I don't like the look of the dog. However, it may kiss my hand.
Rather not.
Don't be pertinent and don't look at me like that.
A cat may look at a king. I read that in some book, but I don't remember where.
Well, it must be removed. My dear, I wish you would have this cat removed.
Off with his head.
I'll go fetch the executioner myself.
And he hurried off. Alice thought she might as well go back and see how the game was getting on, as she heard the queen's voice in the distance screaming with passion. She went in search of her hedgehog, and by the time she got back to the Cheshire cat, she was surprised to find quite a large crowd collected round it, and a dispute going on between the executioner, the king, and the queen, who were all talking at once, while all the rest were quite silent and looked very uncomfortable. The moment Alice appeared, she was appealed to by all three to settle the question, and they repeated their arguments to her, though, as they all spoke at once, she found it very hard indeed to make out exactly what they said.
You can't cut off a head unless there's a body to cut it off from. I've never had to do such a thing, and I'm not going to begin.
Anything that has a head can be beheaded, and you aren't to talk nonsense.
Something isn't done about it in less than no time of everybody executed all around.
It was this last remark that made the whole party look so grave and anxious.
It belongs to the Duchess. You'd better ask her about it.
She's in prison. Fetch her here.
And the executioner went off like an arrow. The cat's head began fading away the moment he was gone, and by the time he returned, the cat had disappeared. So the king and the executioner ran wildly up and down looking for it, while the rest of the party went back to the game.